Not long ago, scientismist and climate change realist Bill Nye, whose new show Bill Nye Saves the World is nothing but a blatant attempt to usurp my position as savior, claimed that climate change has gotten so bad that it's time we submit to population control as a way to solve it. Let's hear what this false messiah has to say.
Well, so the average Nigerian emits 0.1 metric tons of carbon annually. How many does the average American emit?
I did that with my coffee this morning.
Yeah, 16 metric tons is
so
what the average...
160 times.
Yeah, exactly. And so our two kids are way more problematic. The Nigerians with an average 7 children are not the problem when it comes to climate change.
So should we have policies that penalize people for having extra kids in the developed world?
So I do think that we should at least consider it.
Well, at least consider it is like do it.
According to Nye and his guest, 7 Nigerians are doing less damage to the environment than 2 Americans. Now that's basically true as long as you're just looking at carbon emissions from fossil fuel use and completely ignoring the massive amounts of environmental damage done by agriculture, fishing, and poaching, which are a far bigger threat to the environment than fossil fuels. But even if we ignore all that and just take Bill Nye and his guest at their word that 2 Americans are worse for the environment than 7 Nigerians, and even if he's right that our environmental problems are so bad that we have to use population control in order to save the world, is penalizing people for having kids really the best way to go about that? And what does that mean for the rest of our social and economic policies? Let's take immigration here. Those 7 Nigerians are only consuming less than 2 Americans if they stay in Nigeria and if they continue to consume like Nigerians. So if 2 of those Nigerians move to the US, and thanks to our wage laws and social welfare programs, they quickly start to consume just like the average American, well, now those 7 Nigerians are actually worse for the environment than 2 Americans. So if we can't afford to let Americans have too many kids, then we also can't afford to let people from poor countries move to developed countries and start consuming just like people from the developed world. After all, immigration is a bigger source of population growth in most developed countries than births. So, thanks to Bill Nye, the world will now see Trump's massive border wall for what it really is, a green climate initiative designed to prevent good people from poor countries, who consume very little, from moving to the developed world and turning into filthy evil polluters. And what about foreign aid? If we keep sending development aid to Nigeria and improve their economy and increase their standard of living, well, they'll just end up consuming more and more and burning more fuel. If we're too successful, someday they might even start consuming just as much as Americans and become just as problematic as we are. Sorry, Nigeria, we can't keep sending you foreign aid if it's just going to turn you into a bunch of high-polluting, problematic Americans. And what about social welfare programs like Social Security and Medicare? If we can't even afford to let people produce another generation of workers, a lot of whom are going to grow up to manufacture solar panels and construct wind turbines and grow sustainable farms, surely we can't afford to keep taking care of 80 and 90-something-year-old retirees who will never work again, and certainly never do anything to solve climate change. Between Social Security and Medicare, the US government spends more money taking care of retirees than they spend on the military, and the US spends more on its military than the entire rest of the world combined. That's a huge amount of consumption, and Medicare pays our smartest, most scientifically knowledgeable workers to take care of old people who are going to die anyway, while our planet dies. Surely we need those people to work on solving climate change instead of saving the longest living generation in history in the richest country on Earth, literally the most privileged group of people who have ever lived, right? Especially since Nye and his fans are so concerned about every other form of privilege. Not to mention that aging, like immigration, is a bigger source of population growth in the developed world, where births are already below replacement rates. Bill Nye is a false prophet. He suggests that we punish people for having kids, which won't do anything whatsoever to solve climate change, while at the same time, he's a champion for left-wing causes like open borders and welfare that are a much worse cause of the problem than children. But he is right about one thing. Our ecosystem is unfortunately collapsing, and it is collapsing because we consume too much. The world has lost half of its animal wildlife since 1970. And if we continue to lose wildlife at the rate that we're losing it, we're going to see an ecological collapse before most millennials hit retirement age. Which is yet another reason why they shouldn't be forced to pay for Social Security and Medicare that they're not going to be able to collect on, because they'll be dead, because our world will be dead. But even here, Nye is wrong about the main source of the problem. Climate change from greenhouse gas emissions is responsible for only 7% of wildlife loss. Even within that 7%, agriculture is responsible for about a third of greenhouse gas emissions, so fossil fuels are responsible for less than 5% of wildlife loss. The main causes of wildlife loss are hunting, fishing, poaching, and habitat destruction and change, which are mostly caused by agriculture. Feeding people is destroying the world much faster than fossil fuels. And since sustainable farms take a lot more labor than factory farms, just as renewable energy requires far more labor than fossil fuels, we'll need a lot more workers to solve the problem, and we won't be able to afford to take care of any adults who consume more than they produce. That means we need to produce plenty of children who will grow up to do the difficult, dangerous jobs like handling livestock, doing construction and electrical work on new power plants, and mining for the rare minerals needed to make solar panels and wind turbines, and fewer elderly and disabled people who can't keep up with the difficult, dangerous, and complicated work that needs to be done to save our world. We need more construction workers, miners, and farmers, the carpenters and fishermen of this modern era, to do these jobs and save the world. What we don't need is more welfare leeches, and programs like food stamps and Medicaid that help keep people alive and consuming for as long as possible, whether they work or not. Those contribute more to our environmental problems than oil subsidies. Let's end both. Now, I know a lot of you are sitting there at home scratching your heads and wondering, why is Jesus telling us to stop feeding the hungry and caring for sick and old people? I thought he helped all those people with his miracles. Well, yeah, I did. With miracles. Can you work miracles? No? Well, guess what? Neither can Bill Nye. Bill Nye can't even figure out a proper solution to climate change, let alone work a miracle. So maybe for those of you who can't work miracles, you should learn to read between the lines and realize that it would take a miracle to give people free food and healthcare without your whole system breaking down, and stop trying to do it before you destroy the entire world. Maybe even take a look at some verses from the Old Word that were designed for non-miracle working people like you. Like this passage, for example. For even when we were with you, we gave you this commandment. If anyone shall not work, they also shall not eat. 2 Thessalonians 3:10. For those of you who've switched over to the New Word, I offer you this very relevant passage. To save the life of a relative who is soon going to die of old age has less of an impact on the gene pool of the future than to save the life of an equally close relative who has the bulk of his life ahead of him. The Selfish Gene, chapter 6, 95. By both the old gods and the new, we should be far more concerned with the survival of those who have an entire lifetime of contributing to society ahead of them than the survival of those who've already lived their entire lives and stopped contributing to society and who aren't expected to ever work again no matter how much we spend on their care. And that spending is not merely money. It's the resources we're destroying our ecosystem to harvest and consume, and the labor of our best and brightest citizens. We need to reject left-wing economic policies that encourage people to consume too much. We need to reject inflationary monetary policy that encourages spending and debt over saving and hard work. We need to reject welfare programs that overwork our hardest working citizens to take care of people who don't work when we're already asking our workers to work harder for less in order to solve climate change and save the world. We need an immigration system that only lets people from poor countries move to wealthier countries if they're willing to help solve the problems modern society has created, not create more problems that society will have to solve. You have a choice to make. You can take the blue pill and continue to buy into the left-wing propaganda and believe that we can save everyone alive today, no matter how old, how sick, how lazy, or how useless they are, by sacrificing our most productive citizens and future generations on the altar of socialism, where you'll stay plugged into the socialist machine that's warming our planet and killing all other life on Earth while destroying any future your species had. Or you can take the red pill, break out of the socialist machine, and try to save the world from people who consume more than they contribute to society, from people who can't accept that death is a natural part of life that's supposed to come to people who can no longer do their part to keep society going, from people who claim to want to save every living person so badly that they're willing to destroy our future to do it. I know there are many cowards and lazy people who would choose the blue pill, but I hope there are enough of you who are brave and know that survival is something you must always keep fighting for, to join me in taking this red pill. Together we can save the world from the socialist machine and its agents and secure a future for human children. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my video, please subscribe and feel free to share it freely. Preach the word, spread the message. And if you can afford it, feel free to donate to me on Patreon as well at patreon.com/storytimewithjesus. But please, no more than 10% of your income. Make sure you take care of yourself first so that you can afford to take care of others. Have a blessed day.